If you guys can't hear me in the back, just gesture with your hands and I'll try to raise my volume. So yes, my name is Tino van der Kraan. I run a small independent game studio together with Alwin Verploegen. The studio is called Sessebot Studio, so this is my partner. And we are currently developing an interactive narrative experience called Fragments of Him, with the help from Mata, cameo appearance, yay. And I also used to be a design and production teaching assistant for 9 months here at NHTV. Boy, I hope my voice holds up. So in my free time, I occasionally also do some VJ performances in clubs and other venues. And I've done so for the last 5 years or so. Actually, who of you guys was at Camp Lost this year? Great. Have you seen this thing? Yes. Awesome. Sweet. So that's something I do in my spare time. You can check out that video later if you want. So why should you listen to anything I have to say? And what can I mean to you guys? Well, for me, it has been a little more than a year ago that I graduated from IGAD, and I am now proud to call myself a bachelor of engineering in game architecture and design. And I have had a really, really great time here at IGAD. I've learned an incredible amount, made a whole bunch of friends, and forged a lot of networks. And by the time I graduated, I was able to make games by myself. And after all, that is what they train in IGD to do here, right? So, IGAD is tough. You probably know this already by now, but IGAD is really tough. During my time at IGAD, it hasn't all been sunshine and bumblebees though. IGAD is hard, and that is where I hope to be able to help you today with the tips and the tricks and the life lessons that I've learned along the way and pass them on to you, and which have allowed me to graduate within 4 years. So I present you the IGAD Guide to Graduation. So this guide is broken up into chapters, and it aims to give you all the information you will need to make it through IGAD in 4 years. Most, if not all the information that you will need should be in this presentation. However, it will be up to you to actually follow through and put in the work and get your diploma yourself. So this guide is cut up into 7 chapters and will cover critical and useful information applicable during and after your IGAD career. So let's take a look at these chapters. First one is, why are you here? It might sound very redundant, but it's actually it will be a recurring theme. Second is understanding the system. Believe it or not, NHTV follows a system to try to get you to graduate. The roadmap to graduation. How will this look in the broad scale of things? Then there are methods and tools and tips that helped me along the way to just keep my structure and keep my motivation. Then there's also a section called Professionalism. After asking a lot of feedback from other students, current students, that was quite a recurring theme to improve on yourself and not only just do the things that IGAD asks you to do. Then there's also a chapter of motivation, because even though it sounds simple on paper, it might not always be that simple to push yourself to do the things that you have to do. And the last one is useful links and resources. So let's move on to the very first chapter. Why are you here? So now that you know a little bit about me, I would like to know a little bit more about you. So, who are you? Can all the designers and producers please raise your hand? Alright, that's more than I expected. Alright, cool. All the programmers? Alright, got some competition here. Artists. Wow, that's an even spread. It's better than last year. And all the indies. All chunked up in the middle, right? So, sweet. So the first chapter is the $1 million question that will either make your time at IGAD great, or it can end up being really, really frustrating. I can imagine that nearly all of you are here because you like games, are interested in the game industry, and have a particular affinity with one of the directions that IGAD offers. However, some of you are also here because you like playing games, and let's make it pretty clear that consuming games is really not the same as producing games. And if you assume that you will mostly be playing games near the end of your school career or anywhere in your professional career, then let me shatter that dream for you right here, right now. If you much rather prefer to be playing games professionally, then I propose you either become an e-athlete or make a living out of streaming games. And these are currently viable ways to making a living, so don't feel bad if that is the case. But sure, you can argue that playing games is important to understand what is relevant in the games industry and to perform case studies to understand how games actually work. But if you came to IGAD with the impression that it's all about playing games, then I think by now you should realize that this is not the case. So back to the question: why are you here? Ask yourself why you are here. Really think about that question for a while. Why did you choose to study game development? Hopefully it's not primarily because of external driving motivators such as parents or friends or fame or money. I really hope it is because you are passionate about the medium of games and the possibilities that it offers. I hope that you are excited because of all the beautiful art that you can be creating. I hope also that it's because creating interactive systems really excites you. Or the joy of an idea of a game concept that strikes you in the middle of the night and can get you back to sleep. I really hope that those are the driving factors. So maybe you don't know why you are here yet, and that is a possibility too. But ask yourself if it's worth 1,951 euros per year of tuition fee to figure that out for yourself. So before I joined IGAD, I studied to become a PE teacher. It was a period of my life where I was really into free running and into parkour, and I figured that teaching sports and exercise was my thing at that point in life. And let me tell you that I really loved the sports that we got taught there, and that doing sports is really not the same as teaching to do sports in education. It took me roughly 1.5 years to figure that out, what I wanted to do with my life, and realized that I had already given myself the answer to that question when I was really young. Somewhere in 3rd grade, I can remember getting the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? You probably remember that question as well. And I can still remember quite distinctly saying, I want to make games. Because back then, and still now today, games have been a huge part of my life. Much more than free running, much more than parkour, much more than sports have been. And having discovered that for myself has really given me purpose. So knowing why you are here will really help you apply focus to spending time on that. So how do you know that IGAD is for you? You figure that out by asking yourself the very difficult questions. What do you aspire to be? Where do you aspire to be? What do you really like in the game making process? Is it something that you can see yourself doing for long periods at a time? Are you self-motivated to invest time in this? And why is this person in front of me asking all these difficult questions? To see if you're still paying attention. Alright, so finding something that you have no problem focusing on will prevent motivation issues later on. Otherwise, you will need to push yourself to do work that you really inherently do not enjoy doing. So sometimes you simply don't know what you want, but actively trying to find the answer to that question can help you get to where you want to be in life. So if making games does not make you happy, but living as a hermit in Switzerland does, then by all means, go pursue that dream. We are all, to some degrees, in pursuit of happiness. So hopefully the rigorous student recruitment process has ensured that all of you here today should by now know why you have came to IGAD. So it's time to look at the next chapter. The next chapter, understanding the system. So obviously NHTV follows a system in order to get you to graduate, but it's also but it is for you to understand how that system works and comply to it if you wish to make it out of here with a degree. So when I first started at IGAD, I was bombarded with an overload of information, and it made me lose track of all the important pieces of information that was handed to me. So let's try and understand the system so that you know what you need to do in order to graduate within 4 years. So can anyone here tell me what an ECTS is, or an ECTS credit? And yeah, one finger, cool. Exactly, cool. But I can't blame the rest of you. I didn't know by the time I got started as well. But yeah, ECTS stands for the European Credit Transfer and Accumulation System. And it basically keeps track of your academic achievements throughout European countries concerning higher educations. So yes, you are right. One ECTS credit is equivalent to 28 hours of study. And for all the directions, programming, visual arts, design and production, and indie game design, it all equates to 240 credits that you have to accumulate. So on paper, everyone is equal here. So how does this spread over 4 years? So The first 2.5 years you will be passing your courses, and this will accumulate up to 159 credits. Then the next half year you will get another 21 credits in your specialization phase. Then when you pass your work placement, you will get another 30, and finally your graduation phase, if you successfully do that as well, you have all your 240 credits and you are a graduate. Awesome. So let's do a little bit of math. So 1 year equals to 4 blocks equals to 60 credits and is 1680 hours of estimated work. So that means that 1 block is also equal to 9 weeks and equal to 15 credits and equal to 420 hours. So that means that for 1 week you are expected to do 46 and 2/3 of an hour of work. So an average 9-to-5 job will cost you, hi, welcome, please take a seat. An average 9-to-5 job will cost you roughly 40 hours a week. This means that IGAD will ask more hours from you per week than an average job will. So in other words, if you spend 8 hours a day on IGAD, you will have to sacrifice some of your free time and to increase your chances at graduating here at IGAD. And that is generally what is expected of you in order to get your degree. I can imagine that you might think that this is a very sort of macro approach to seeing this system. So let's disseminate this a little and go through this year by year. So we get to chapter 3, the road to graduation. So in your first year, which will consist out of your courses and your propadeutic, and you can obtain 15 credits per block, a total of 60 credits. At the end, in the first year, if you get all your 60 credits, then it basically means you are worthy of studying a bachelor degree. So you will need at least 54 credits in order to make it to second year. But you will have to obtain your propadeutic within your second year to even be able to finish IGAD. So if you do not get the credits from your first year within the first 2 years of IGAD, you will receive a negative binding advice. This basically means that you are not worthy of studying a bachelor's degree and should therefore GTFO, unfortunately. So, great. You have made it to second year by now. And if you have not yet scraped your 60 credits together for your propadeutic, then you have this year left to do so. Otherwise, it's still the GTFO. The rest of the block is pretty much like the first year, where you can obtain credits, 15 per block, 60 in total. So just keep following your courses to get those credits. Then third year, this one is cut up into the first half is courses, the second half is specialization. So I've been told that there are 39 credits to be gathered in the first half of this year. That was the case last year. I assume it's still the case this year. I don't know how these are currently distributed over the currently available blocks. Then the second part is where you do your specialization. This is where you tackle a specialized problem with a predominantly theoretical approach or a predominantly practical approach. Or a mix of the two. And I believe that you can obtain 21 credits for completing your specialization. So do note that you cannot start your specialization if you are more than 6 credits behind. So, to start your fourth year, you are allowed to be 10 credits behind. The first half of this year, you have to go on an internship, and that will earn you 30 credits. So the internship coordinator for the NHTV is Mariella de Meijer. So if you find a company you would like to be interning at, contact Mariella with the request of an internship, and if it can be arranged through the proper channels of the NHTV. If you don't know where you want to be interning at, then she can help you as well in that regard. So just so you know that our company, Sessual Studio, is also accepting interns, and we currently have a VA student who is enjoying her time very much at our company. So if you want more information, just head to our website, sessual.com/jobs, and that's the end of that plug. So the last half year of your fourth year will be your graduation phase. And to be able to start this phase, you're allowed to also be 10 credits behind. So this phase is very similar to the specialization phase, where it is cut up, or where it is up to you to graduate on a proposed project that is defined by you and approved by your graduation supervisor. So finally, you are required to pass an oral exam for your graduation. So to start this exam, you will have to eliminate any credit deficit you still have. So this is the very last thing you have to do in order to graduate. After you have defined your graduation work in an oral exam and passed this exam, you can count yourself an alumni or an alumna. And you will get the last 30 credits for your 240. And then you should be graduated. So let's quickly go over this once more. First year, 60 credits. Get 54 credits to enter the second year. Then preferably get 60 credits to receive your ProProduce. Second year, obtain all the credits you have not yet gotten, otherwise you have the GTFO. Then third year, split up into two. The first half is courses, the second half is specialization. Fourth year, then is a work placement and your graduation, and you are done. So that is the gist of it. That is the roadmap to actually get you to graduate. So what kind of tools and methods and tips can you use to accomplish this more easily? So you know how the system works and what you are expected to do in order to graduate from this place. So the quest is pretty clear, but you will need some gear to tackle this. So yeah, let's get to the methods to get through this. So basically, if you look at IGAD from a macro point of view, there are three methods you can apply to actually get through IGAD. So the first covers courses, the second covers the specialization and graduation because they're very similar, and then there's the work placement. So let's run through this pretty quickly because they are pretty boring. So first, register on Osiris for relevant courses. Read your course documentation, read the assignment brief and documentation clearly. Take note of exactly what you will be graded on, anything else hardly matters. First meet and then exceed the expectations of the lecturer. Then break down your assignments into smaller tasks. Spread these tasks out in a calendar and include a buffer ranging from a few days to a week to account for any unforeseen circumstances. Then estimate that you will need at least twice the amount of time that you think you will be needing for a task, also for fail-safes. And check NetSchool at the start of every week for updates in course documentation. Because if the course documentation is not there, then you should really ask your lecturer about it, because I think they are actually obliged to put this up on NetSchool at the start of each block. Also double check the thank you very much. Also double check the assessment criteria before handing in, because as the saying goes, measure twice, cut once. Then the method for the specialization and graduation. Also run through this quickly. Also register for Osiris. It would be really unfortunate if you show up for any exam or you hand in your assignments but you did not register. That would be a shame. So read the relevant course outline for your specialization and graduation. Carefully and explicitly formulate what you're going to be working on, because now you shift from receiving assignments and executing them to formulating your own assignments and doing your own planning and justifying what you do and why. Then apply great focus on the scope of your specialization and graduation. It's very easy to be too broad with your statement of what you're going to do in this case. Very clearly and concisely write down the objectives that you are going to fulfill. Break down how you are going to achieve these objectives in small and manageable tasks. It will make it a lot easier for you. Determine in which order it's best to take on these tasks. Make a rough estimate of how long each task is going to take and multiply that estimate once more by 2 or 3 times. And here it's depending on how much experience you have with doing a particular task. It will make the prediction a lot more accurate. So enter these tasks in a calendar with appropriate time estimates, and make sure that you have included everything in the course outline that it expects you to deliver, such as documentation and monthly reports. So finish each task to an acceptable self-imposed standard, because remember, you are formulating your own projects in this case. Before moving on to the next task, just be very systematic in this approach. Your quality will arise from the number of iterations you can apply to your work. So the more times you can give a pass to your work, the better the quality of your product will be. Send in deliverables several days before the deadline and ask your supervisor for confirmation that they have actually received it. It would also be a shame that that got lost in the phrase somewhere. So the differences with graduation, the differences between specialization and graduation is that for graduation, there will be an oral exam where you basically defend the work that you have done to a panel of industry professionals. And you will need to hand in all your paperwork in triplicate, as well as the contents of your project, I think on a DVD for archiving. So don't forget to do that as well. And then it's time for a party. But not yet, because we have forgotten the work placement. So this is cut up into 2 parts. First is getting a placement, and second is what to do at a placement. So investigate what company you would like to start off second year. And there's also a disclaimer because this method is not derived from experience, because I was fortunate enough to have been given an internship at Philips Research based on some assignment results in the class. But below is a method that just sounds very reasonable and a proactive way to approach this. So, this is not from my experience, but I can advise you to do this. So investigate what company you would like to work at pretty early on. So at, let's say, the start of second year. Then find out what they expect from their interns, what they ask from their interns. Also talk to Marielle de Meijer once more and to see if NHTV has any contacts with this company. If not, then ask her to get in touch with the company to ask about the possibilities for interns. Use the information that you have gathered about the intern recruitment requirements found on the company page, and use it as a way to give direction to your specialization if you so choose to. So while working on your specialization, try to get in touch with someone at that company for feedback on your work via Twitter, because active Twitter users usually love a conversation where they can preach their knowledge to those that ask for it. So now we're not done yet. So use the newly acquired network contact when the time comes to recommend you as an intern to the ones that actually make the calls at these companies. Keep a backup plan in mind though, because it can simply be that they have no request for, let's say, a VA intern or programming intern. So keep some companies in the back of your mind as a backup plan for when this happens. If all else fails, also ask Marielle de Meijer about available internship positions. Don't be late with this request, or all the cool companies will already have been taken. So now you have actually gotten your internship. So what to do at an internship? Once more, register with Osiris, otherwise you'll just fail instantly. To pass, you will need 3 things: a plan, a learning journal, and 2 assessment interviews with a company supervisor. So to get an understanding of what you will be doing at a work placement, so get that understanding and list it as an objective in this plan, pretty much. And keep track of what you've done each day in a work log, how many hours you have worked, and what you've been working on. Use this work log to remind yourself of what you've done when writing a weekly report. Add screenshots or progress reports for a much richer report in this regard. So every 4 weeks you should send in a monthly report to your supervisor. So keep doing that as well. By the end of your placement, you should have 5 monthly reports, which you can use as your learning journal. So be sure to remind your company supervisor halfway through and at the end of your placement about the mandatory assessment interviews. Hand in your planned learning journal and assessment interviews before the deadline, and you should be all set. Finally, be very nice to everyone at the company, because these networks can be very, very valuable. Sometimes you even end up working at the company you have done your internship at. Some of the tools that you will be needing for this: of course, NetSchool for your course descriptions, assignments, assessment criteria, course content. Check for updates every week, and bother your lecturers if anything is missing. Calendar. This is how my calendar looked during 2012. You can't actually read anything on it. But that was during my specialization phase. I was working as a teaching assistant by then. I had 4 gigs that month, worked on my company's Spreadsheet as well, and did specialization. So if you just structure your work and do a little bit every day, then it's very, very manageable. Also, spreadsheets. I use Google Spreadsheet quite often. So these are the work logs I keep from even 2013 and 14. I started doing that January 1st in 2013. And it's very useful to just backtrack of what you've done and how much time it costed you. And it's also not that much time to actually add that information. You just have to keep reminding yourself. And that's why you have a calendar. So, Notepad for quickly writing down anything you should forget. And then finally, I use a lot of Google Hangouts during that period to send notes to yourself of anything that you add to your Notepad. So that's just all the gist of it. And finally, of course, Osiris, because it says in the bottom, students will be required to register by the means of Osiris. So otherwise, you can just fill that course. So there's also a whole lot of tips and tricks. For the sake of time, because we have been starting later, I will skip through all the tips and tricks I have listed down here. I'll probably make this available online somewhere so you can read through these. But just for the sake of time, I'm going to skip everything I've written down here and go to the next chapter. Professionalism. I see some of you smiling here, so you're probably familiar with where this came from. So previous chapters focused on making it through IGAD efficiently, but it did not really cover how to get the best out of your work. So this chapter is about improving yourself as a professional. When writing this presentation, I received a lot of feedback from former students and former fellow students on how to also improve on your craft and not only finish IGAD with the bare minimum. So let's start with you. Consider what you like to improve on yourself, both personally as well as professionally. Set up small challenges for yourself in order to achieve this. Don't be the guy that knows it all, because it can eventually backfire on you when you finally get it wrong. Communicate very clearly towards people. Explain what you mean and always keep your promises. Also take regular showers. Strong smells are pretty distracting and not very professional. No, not even in the industry. Your work. So we've gone from you to actually your work. Don't be afraid to ask feedback about your work. Asking feedback from people outside of IGAD is also a very good thing to do. I know that artists can go to, for example, Polycount or Game Artisans or conceptart.org. It can be very scary to put your work up for people to judge, but it will help you grow as a professional so much faster. So also be very critical of your work in order to improve your skill. If you have a silly idea for some concept or an idea or a system, just write it down. You never know when that might be useful once again. Also accept criticism. It is there to make you a better professional. And don't take feedback personal. If someone provides you with feedback, it's usually to make you better. Also, especially with lecturers, sometimes it can come across as quite sort of unpersonal and blunt when a lecturer gives feedback on your work. But they are there to help you improve, and just being blunt about it and honest about it is the fastest way to communicate to you that you have something to improve on. Then, your peers, how to be professional with your fellow students. So attend classes and meetings on time. Be nice, be a very nice person. Apologize if you happen to arrive late for whatever reason. Not doing so is very disrespectful towards the time you are wasting of others. College might be forgiving here, but I can assure you that the industry generally isn't. Don't immediately assume something is wrong when criticizing your work, or accept that don't immediately assume someone is wrong when they're criticizing your work, or accept that they are right from the get-go. Try to understand why they react to your work the way they do. So try to be understanding. Respect other people, their preferences, their opinions. This is a very small industry, so don't burn your bridges because you might one day need them. Even if you dislike a peer or a mentor's work method, just pay attention. You could still learn things from it. Maybe you disagree on someone's way of doing things, but that doesn't mean you should consider their opinion any less valuable. So ask about why they do something in a certain way and see if it makes sense to you. See if you can use it somehow. Also, never leave bugs you can clearly see, because details matter. Then, how to be a professional with your team. So this is largely for team leaders in teams, but it also helps with team members itself. Avoid being an authoritarian leader in teams. It is the very stereotypical role we know from media, but it really works counterproductive. A team lead is usually there for the team and not the other way around. So treat your team members as the human beings they are. Listen to them, try to understand their problems, their worries and frustrations, because the fewer issues the fewer issues that your team members have on their mind, the more productive they will eventually be. So make everyone feel part of the team. Getting an overview of the project is largely the result of your team communicating its status, and for that they have to be comfortable speaking up about it. So get everyone to speak up without the fear of being judged. Then, when leading a team, be very clear on what you expect from the team and what they can expect from you. Don't be afraid to put this in writing. Discuss fair consequences with your team for not meeting your expectations, and write this down too. This does not mean that the team lead can impose rules, hardly anything like it. Your team members are more inclined to follow up on rules if they have had a say in the formation of these rules, and additionally if they have had a say in the consequences for breaking these rules. And then finally, there is little to no reason for someone to deem it unfair to receive the resulting consequence if they were there to actually agree on these rules being made. So also put these rules and consequences in writing for everyone to read in a clear and very concise fashion. Leave no ambiguity here, and have the entire team read and agree on this writing before actually enforcing it. Because I've seen it time and time again that halfway through game lab or at the end of game lab, the frustration of a non-performing team member keeps adding up, and eventually there's nothing for you to do about it anymore. So be very clear about what you expect from your team and what your team can expect from you, and have everyone agree on it. So then your project. How can you be a professional in your project? When setting up a task for a project, discuss with the leads what needs to be done. So as a team lead, discuss with your leads what needs to be done in order to finish the project. I found that design by committee is generally a very poor method of approaching making games, because otherwise you'll just be shouting ideas and you don't really get a cohesive design for a game. Then let the leads talk to the individual team members to find out what work they are comfortable with doing, and what they can have done by the next meeting. So I think that self-imposed deadlines work very well, because it will give a team member ownership of the tasks that they set for themselves, and will often result in the person not only wanting to prove that they can deliver, but not delivering to your team lead is not only letting your team lead down, but also letting yourself down if you follow self-imposed rules. So someone will usually overestimate the what they can do to actually finish a project within a given time frame. So this can benefit the project, because then they will be doing more work than they actually can manage. However, ask for your team members occasionally if they can actually handle the work they have given themselves. Try to let them be honest about it, because we don't want peer pressure to burn anyone out here. So always make it very clear what the specifics of the tasks are in a project, what the consequence is for not meeting this deadline, and if the person in the team does not care about the team or the project and did acknowledge the consequences for not delivering, then it only makes sense that warnings will follow. So removing a non-performing team member should, in that case, be a win-win situation for both sides, because clearly the person does not want to spend time on the project or on the team. So then by removing that team, it will result in less overhead for the team lead, and the person that is not interested from the get-go will not have to work on the project anymore. So, be very clear and be very clear in what you expect and the consequences for particular actions. So if you want to learn more about leadership in general, Mike Acton from Insomniac Games gives incredibly valuable talks and has written incredibly valuable articles about how to assume a leadership role in your team, and I can highly recommend you looking that up and learning from him. So, Chapter 6, Motivation. Maybe you're still very stoked and psyched for IGAD, but once you get to later years, you might find that your motivation will dwindle. So, all of this sounds pretty easy on paper. The just getting your credits, doing your courses, do everything that's in the course documentation, and just communicate clearly, work hard. It sounds pretty clear, but there's something that is difficult to reason with, and that is just keeping your motivation up. Because I've seen brilliant students having a very hard time finishing IGAD due to a lack of motivation. And to better understand how this exactly works, it is good to try and understand how we as people work in this manner and what we can do to manipulate ourselves in order to counter this. So let's start with motivation. Motivation is derived from the word motive, which is used to explain why people do what they do. So I hope by now you understand why the first chapter of this talk is labeled, Why Are You Here? If it is better to be inherently motivated to do things rather than have an external influence telling you to do so. So if you know that you are here to make games because you love making games, then you will find it a lot easier to find the motivation to pursue this. Then, discipline. It is possible to do the things that you are unmotivated to doing, but you will need discipline for that. And I particularly like the Wikipedia description here that comes with discipline, which states that discipline is the assertion of willpower over more base desires, and is usually understood to be synonymous with self-control. Self-discipline is to some extent a substitute for motivation, when one uses reason to determine the best course of action that opposes one's desires. So hopefully you desire to be here, and desire to make games and make art or write code or whatever you came here to do. However, sometimes you will need to call upon your discipline in order to make it through the courses that don't immediately resonate with you. This is difficult, but we will get to how we can possibly make this a little bit easier for you. But you will, artists will have to do documentation, and programmers will also have to write down their things. It's just an inherent part of IGAD. So try to find the discipline to pull through so you can actually do the fun assignments and make it through to graduating in IGAD. So last term here, stress. Everyone probably is familiar with the term stress, but what does it exactly mean? So stress is basically the body's method of reacting to a challenge, such as a sudden change in environment. And your body responds to this with its nervous system, and it triggers the fight or flight response. So you either rise up to the challenge or you run away and just don't think of it. So let me ask you if anyone here is motivated to stand in front of 200 students and talk for an hour. Oh, some. All right, cool. Rising up to the challenge, cool. So if you are motivated to actually do this, to actually be here and speak to a large group of people, then it is a lot easier to do so. You don't need to bring up the discipline to do something you don't enjoy doing. Because sometimes the stress can just be harmful to deal with. So the way I deal with stress is as follows. It basically is all in your head. You have to convince yourself that instead of looking up to something, you will have to look forward to something. Don't think of the things that could be going wrong. Think of the things that could be going right and look forward to when they go right. So to get this confidence in yourself, you will need to have confidence in the preparation that you do, but also be comfortable with who you are, both physically and mentally. If you feel right at home, if you are in a good spot in your life, then it's a lot easier to bring up this motivation. So here are some things I keep telling myself that I have dealt with when I'm stressed or when I'm demotivated. I just ask myself some of the following things. So first one is purpose. So ask yourself if you still really want to do this. It might be that after several years you have reconsidered, like this is after trying this is not what I want to do. That's fine as well. Just ask yourself that question critically. Because if you do agree that this is exactly what you want to do, it's a lot easier to keep your motivation going. Also, self-doubt, doubting yourself. You should really believe in yourself. It's about the mindset here. If you tell yourself that you could do something, then you usually can. It's amazing what some people do in acrobatics, in engineering. They just keep pushing themselves and don't take no for an answer. So don't forget to actually do it after you've convinced yourself, because you can convince yourself that you can do this, but if you don't put the work in, then all hope is still lost. Don't try to find motivation through comparison, is what I've learned personally. There is this fear of failing something before you have even started on doing it, which has contributed to some of my motivation issues in the past. And seeing what others have made can be pretty daunting because you think you have to sort of live up to that. So that can be examples in your immediate surroundings, in the references you look at, or what you see in the media. And this can be a real problem to get started on something because you think you might not be able to compare with the work that you're currently doing. So what I can recommend here is that you shouldn't compare yourself or your work to others. Just don't. Think about where you are right now and don't think about where you should have been. Try to improve yourself from where you are currently because otherwise the mountain that you will have to climb will seem much larger than you can actually tackle it. So you do this by starting very small. Just accept where you are currently as a professional and then take very small tasks, very small chunks, and work up to slowly bigger chunks of work and projects. Just try to get that confidence back in yourself. So also always accept yourself for who you are, because every single one of you here is unique, and that is a beautiful thing, and it should not be seen as something that differentiates you in a negative way. So, embrace yourself. So, getting started is also a problem sometimes. For me, it helps to tell myself that before I get started on something, that it doesn't need to be specifically anything. Just getting started sometimes helps to get over that hurdle to undertake projects or to undertake courses. And managing your expectations is a big part of overcoming this obstacle. So once you get over that hurdle, it's a lot easier to work on something meaningful. Sometimes the lack of structure is also very demotivating. Confusion, chaos, and uncertainty are not very motivating conditions to be getting any work done. To a degree, you can do something about that by keeping your work and files structured. I wouldn't be very motivated if first I have to spend an hour looking for all the stuff that I need to actually get started. I'd much rather just have everything where I left it last time and get started right away. So structure your files categorically from large to small is what I can advise here. For example, I used to keep my NHTV files sorted by year, by block, by course, and then per course. I made a differentiation between course documentation, assignment delivery folders, and work folders. And if you keep that structure going, it's very easy to find the things you're looking for. I also used to download all the information on a weekly basis so that if the internet falls out for some reason, you can still work on the things and your workflow will not have to be broken up because of it. Fear of failure. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Really don't. Embrace failure as your mentor. Don't run from it. Learning from your mistakes will not only make you better, but a more experienced person and a professional. A professional will admit that making mistakes is part of the learning process, and fear is generally a bad motivator. So don't fear failure, embrace it. Especially in the many weeks prior to your exams and deadlines, it is best to make a lot of mistakes quickly, instead of postponing this to the last possible moment. Lack of energy. Find what brings you peace in mind and use it to balance your life. So eat, sleep, exercise, and shower regularly. And actually, when you are stuck on problems, I have found out that sometimes it helps to just either take a shower or just lie down for a moment. Your brain will start resetting and help you work these problems out. So here also applies that if you start early enough, then you have time to actually apply these tips and tricks. Sometimes you also have personal problems. So if you have personal problems that prevent you from being comfortable with where you are in life, then that is something you need to do something about. So talk to a student counselor. I believe those are the ones you should be approaching for this. And I have heard from sources that they are amazing. So don't be afraid to ask for help as well if you need it. They are there for you. Also finding external motivators. Some have told me that it helps them to set goals and rewards for meeting particular goals. But I think that can only work up to a point, because I think it's much better to find out what drives you internally rather than trying to find external motives in order to make you do those things. For example, money up to a certain point is a fairly good motivator. But once there's no real need for money anymore, then you tend to fall back on your internal motivators until you need money again. So that is how I see external motivators. It can, however, be useful if you really need to do the documentation that you've been looking up for several weeks. So it might be able to help you there. Also feeling useless and unaccomplished. Sometimes I feel like I have accomplished very, very little over the last week, and sometimes that can get me down as well. So I also realized that I am very forgetful, so that's why I write a ton of things down. So when I look back at my work log, I actually feel a lot better because it shows that despite my feeling of not having accomplished anything, I've actually made quite a bit of progress last week, and it helps me enjoy the weekend a lot better, knowing that I've actually done stuff. So keep a work log and prove to yourself that you, in fact, have achieved a lot last week or last month. Or if the opposite is true and you have not achieved anything last week, you should ask yourself if you should be working harder. So keep track of your results and use it as a motivator. Then there is the post-propadeutic slack, as I call it. It is not uncommon for students to relax after they get their propadeus because technically you have earned the right to stay on IGAD. However, if you want to make it through to IGAD within 4 years and don't want to spend 1,951 euros of tuition fee yearly in addition to any other rent or life costs or additional costs, then I can highly recommend you to try and stay on track as much as you are humanly able to. So, also don't underestimate assignments. This wasn't the case for me, but I know others for which it was the case. Sometimes it occurs that you don't see the point of an assignment. You don't see the point of doing it, and it's sometimes because you think you already know how to do it, so the challenge is lost there. So in this case, take up the challenge for yourself and prove it to yourself that if you think something is very easy, well, then it wouldn't hurt to actually do it, and you might actually learn something. So there's really no harm in challenging yourself when you get the notion of, hey, this is super simple. So, procrastination. Procrastination is the practice of carrying out less urgent tasks in preference for more urgent tasks. So we are all guilty of doing this, I'm sure. So how can we actually combat this? How can we counter it? So according to Wikipedia, once more, the strongest connection to procrastination seems to be impulsiveness. So the easy answer to me would be to get rid of any distractions in your surroundings and try to reduce the amount of times that you have to wait on something in your workflow or your production pipeline. So every time you have to wait, you start looking around or you start opening the Facebook tab, and it all sort of eats away from the stuff you could effectively been doing. So if you remove all the distractions from your surroundings, then there wouldn't be an opportunity to respond to those impulses anymore. So I think the bottom line here is just design your workspace in order to get you into that zone, into the workflow zone. For me, repetitive music, an unhealthy amount of coffee, and a browser window cleared of tabs usually does the trick. If something pops into your mind, then don't forget to just write it down and postpone it for later. Write it down and add it to your calendar once your task is actually done. Or when you actually meet that sort of block in your pipeline or your workflow that you actually have to wait for a renderer or something to compile or whatever it may be. Then you look at your notes and like, I can add this to my calendar. By the time you're done there, you can actually get back to your workflow. It just helps get through this work a lot faster so you can actually enjoy some of your spare time. So that concludes all of the major chapters. Some links and resources I've used to put this presentation together is the IGAD OER, and the OER stands for the Open Educational Resources. This is just available online. I think it's like a 60-page document that all higher education should have made available of, and explains how the course actually works, how NHTV works and IGAD works. So go there if you need to know something about how NHTV is structured. Then there's some mid-level documentation as well. So the IGAD course book, you can, I think, get it on NetSchool. I can remember they had one last year. I'm not quite sure if they keep that up, the course book. Also specialization, work placement, and graduation outline you should be able to find there. Also course documentation, assessment criteria, assessment weight, so how heavy an assignment will weigh. And if they're not there, then harass the lecturer. I also want to make you aware of an event happening tonight for game developers. So from 7 until 10 this evening in the Pendant IV, there's a local game developer gathering that I'm organizing with some others from IGAD. So it would be awesome if you could come along. Bring your friends, bring your classmates. And it basically aims to bring developers from all kinds of positions and backgrounds and ethnicities and just preferences, to bring them together to talk games and to just enjoy games. So there will be talks from Ralph Palmer that teaches here at IGAD as well. There will also be a talk from Alex Immersil. He is an IGAD alumnus, and he has founded his own company with a few friends called Split Polygon, and he's there to talk about the game Interstellar Rift that they are making. There will also be a couple of early showings of playable games. I think 2 of them are from IGAD students actually, and just look up the Independent Games Gathering on Facebook for more information about this event, or just hit me up either after this or on Twitter or whatever. So last thing I want to tell you is consider Studio when you're looking for an internship. So thank you very much for your time. Are there any questions? So first of all, thank you for listening. Actually, 1 minute before the end of the class. No questions? Alright, if you want to ask me a question afterwards, I'll just be outside, so just tap me on the shoulder.